Mr. Speaker, 4 victims on the Rape Gangs Survivors Panel have resigned. And they've resigned because they've lost all confidence in the government's inquiry. So I'm giving my first question to one of them, to Fiona. She said, being dismissed and contradicted by a minister when you're telling the truth takes you right back to that feeling of not being believed all over again. Fiona's question is simple. What's the point in speaking up if we're just going to be called liars?
Can I thank her for raising that on behalf of Fiona, and let me give Fiona and the House my answer, Mr. Speaker, because the grooming scandal was one of the worst scandals of our time.
He says that they could return to the panel if they wish to. Why would they do that?
Mr. Speaker, I regret to inform the House that yesterday there was a very serious breach of national security when my PMQ was photographed heading into number 10 through a transparent folder. However, the nation can rest easy. On this occasion, no state secrets were revealed. However, it does make me wonder whether this government can be trusted with a digital ID scheme that is mandatory in all but name. Can the Prime Minister... I'd like to keep the Prime Minister on his toes. Will the Prime Minister reverse this misguided scheme, or will he persist with a plan that makes all of our personal data vulnerable to hacks and attacks?
Prime Minister. Well, I thank you for her question. The whole point of digital ID, of course, is that you can't see it. So that should at least deal with the first of her concerns. Look, it is important that we make access to services, public services, as easy as possible for people. And we all know the difficulties that so many people have accessing services, and digital ID has been shown in other countries to help. I do think this is an important step forward. I also think that it's very important as part of our plan to tackle those who are entering our country illegally.
Mr. Speaker, 4 victims on the Rape Gangs Survivors Panel have resigned. And they've resigned because they've lost all confidence in the government's inquiry. So I'm giving my first question to one of them, to Fiona. She said, being dismissed and contradicted by a minister when you're telling the truth takes you right back to that feeling of not being believed all over again. Fiona's question is simple. What's the point in speaking up if we're just going to be called liars?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising that on behalf of Fiona, and let me give Fiona and the House my answer, Mr. Speaker, because the grooming scandal was one of the worst scandals of our time. Women and girls were abused and exploited by predatory gangs of men, and survivors have been ignored for many years, including by the state that, of course, is supposed to protect them. My vow to Fiona and them is that this national inquiry will change that. I do acknowledge that in recent days some members, including Fiona, have decided to step away from the panel. I say this, Mr. Speaker, should they wish to return, the door will always be open. But even if they do not, we owe it to them and to Fiona and to the country to answer the concerns that they have raised. The inquiry is not and will never be watered down. Its scope will not change. It will examine the ethnicity and religion of the offenders, and we will find the right person to chair the inquiry. I can tell the House today, Mr. Speaker, that Dame Louise Casey will now support the work of the inquiry, and it will get to the truth. Injustice will have no place to hide.
Mr. Speaker, I doubt she'll be satisfied with that answer. He says that they could return to the panel if they wish to. Why would they do that? The government has been engaged in a briefing war against survivors. Elizabeth. Oh, really? They say shame. Why don't they listen to what Elizabeth had to say? Why don't they listen to what Elizabeth had to say? Elizabeth, who was abused in Rotherham from the age of 14, had this to say, and I quote, the government has created a toxic environment for survivors. They were looking for answers from the Prime Minister, and what they've heard is Labour MPs saying shame at their words. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Safeguarding Minister said Elizabeth was wrong. Who should we believe? The Prime Minister's Safeguarding Minister or Elizabeth?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me put on record my respect for all of the survivors who've been through the most awful ordeals. And I want to thank those that have been involved so far for the work in the process. What we're trying to do is to get this right and have an inquiry with survivors at the heart. As the Safeguarding Minister told the House yesterday, that's obviously not easy. They've all come with difficult experiences. There are a wide range of views, understandably, and every survivor does bring their own painful experience to this. The survivors met the prospective chairs this week, and we want to have them to have the chance to engage. I want survivors to be at the heart of this. I want an inquiry that can get to the truth. These are the hard yards, I accept that. But I want to press on and get this right.
Mr. Speaker, he says that he wants survivors to be at the heart of this. But in his first PMQs this year, he said we did not need a national inquiry. And when he did, all of these MPs cheered. They were nodding their heads, including the Safeguarding Minister. They voted against the national inquiry 3 times. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They voted against the national inquiry. They voted against the national inquiry 3 times, so the victims don't believe them. They can say no as much as they like. It is on the record. They don't like it, but it's true. Now, one of the victims has quit. Contrary to what the Prime Minister's just said and what the Home Secretary wrote this morning, they believe that the inquiry will downplay the racial and religious motivations behind their abuse. Aren't the victims right when they call it a cover-up?
Prime Minister.
Well, let me reassure the victims and the House that the scope of the inquiry will not be diluted, and we won't shy away from cultural or religious issues. And, Mr. Speaker, it was me that commissioned Baroness Casey in the first place, who gave me her recommendation in relation to a national inquiry, and we have, in the 4 months since then, finalised the panel and trying to get the leadership of this inquiry right, with survivors at the heart. Mr. Speaker, in that period, we have also reopened 1,200 historic closed cases. I have long argued, Mr. Speaker, that the criminal route where it can be pursued is the right route for perpetrators. We've introduced mandatory reporting of child sex abuse. I happen to think that is a vital safeguard. I've been campaigning for that for over a decade. I asked the last government to introduce it, and that fell on deaf ears. And that mandatory reporting of child sex abuse is something each and every one of them voted against earlier this year. And we've given victims and survivors the power to seek an independent review of their cases. But, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this inquiry, I want to go as fast as we can to get the justice that is deserved. I want to ensure survivors are involved in that, and we're balancing the two to get this right, and I'll continue to do so.
Mr. Speaker, he's talking about mandatory reporting. I will remind him what Fiona asked. What is the point if the victims aren't going to be believed? What would be the point of mandatory reporting? All of this is happening now. All he's saying is because 4 of those victims resigned from the survivors panel. If they hadn't done that, they would have continued with the watering down, which we all know that they were carrying out. So, yes, the victims are right to be worried. He also talked about looking for a chair. It has been 10 months since we first called for a national inquiry. 10 months. It is shocking that they still do not have a chair. One of the final 2 candidates, Mr. Speaker, has pulled out, leaving a former police officer that the victims don't want. What they do want is a judge. They deserve a judge. So, Mr. Speaker, we are talking now. We are talking about the industrial-scale rape of women and girls. Unlike most of the inquiries going on, why is it that this inquiry doesn't deserve a judge?
Prime Minister.
Can I answer that? It's a serious point, Mr. Speaker, because whether it should be judge-led was looked at by Louise Casey, and she decided against that for a reason, and her reasons were twofold. I'll spell them out. The first was the speed with which we could do this, and it would have been... They asked the question, and the first was the speed with which we could do this. The second is really important, and that is that at the same time as the inquiry, I was absolutely determined that criminal investigations would go on at the same time. One of the problems that judge-led inquiries run into, I've seen and experienced this myself, is that they're often held back until the end of the criminal investigations. And I was determined that we'd be able to run the two together. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to reopen 1,200 historic cases at the same time. And, Mr. Speaker, she asks, what's the point of mandatory reporting that she voted against? I don't think she understands how it works. This, Mr. Speaker, is mandatory reporting of those that have had allegations made to them, and there's clear enough evidence they've then not passed that on. That is a fundamental problem in the system. That is why we've changed the law. They should hang their heads in shame for having voted against that vital protection.
What he should hang his head in shame in is calling this a far-right bandwagon when we first raised this issue. The deputy leader, the future deputy leader, we all know who's going to win, called this a dog whistle. What we need to think about right now, Mr. Speaker, is the victims. It is the survivors. I spoke to one of them yesterday. Let's remember, these are victims who waged their anonymity, an incredibly difficult thing to do. And they believe that the Safeguarding Minister has lied to them and about them. One of the survivors has said, and I quote, "Jess Phillips needs to be removed because I don't think her conduct during this has been acceptable for the position that she holds." That is, those aren't my words. Those are the words of a survivor. It is a shame that Labour MPs are drowning that out. The member for Birmingham Yardley has clearly lost the confidence of the victims. Does she still have the confidence of the Prime Minister?
Can I just say that, Prime Minister, even if we are quoting somebody else, we shouldn't quote it because it's a direct allegation against a member of this House. So I'm sure that that's not what was intended, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I respect the views of all the survivors, and there are different views. I accept that. But the Safeguarding Minister, I think, has probably more experience than any other person in this House in dealing with violence against women and girls. Alongside her will be Louise Casey. These two individuals, Mr. Speaker, have spent decades standing up for those who have been abused and sexually exploited. And I absolutely think they're the right people to take this forward.
Mr. Speaker, she doesn't have more experience than the survivors. The fact is, just a few weeks ago, he was standing there telling us he had full confidence in the best friend of a convicted paedophile. So it is no surprise that people have no confidence in what he is saying. The victims have said that she should be sacked. We on this side of the House believe that she should be sacked because this is about Labour failure. Labour never wanted this inquiry. We demanded it. It has been Labour-run councils, Trafford, Bradford, Blackpool, that tried to suppress the truth. It is Labour ministers attacking the victims. We're standing up for them. And how is it, Mr. Speaker, how is it that whether it is rape or Chinese espionage, when he's in a position to do something about it, it's always someone else's fault?
Mr. Speaker, my priorities are listening to and standing up for the survivors. That's why we're doing the work on the inquiry. That's why we've reopened the criminal cases, why we brought in mandatory reporting. But I would gently remind them they had 14 years in office. They barely mentioned this issue. And where there were inquiries, they failed to act on them. We have done more in the time we've been in office than they did in 14 long years.
Mr. Speaker, given the revelations about Royal Lodge, does the Prime Minister agree that this House needs to properly scrutinise the Crown Estate to ensure taxpayers' interests are protected? The Chancellor herself has said that the current arrangements are wrong. So will the Prime Minister support a select committee inquiry so all those involved can be called for evidence, including the current occupant?
Prime Minister.
Well, it's important in relation to all properties, Crown properties, that there is proper scrutiny. I certainly support that.
Sir Ed Davey.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope the House can look at this properly and all people can be summoned to the relevant committee. But turning to the economy now, Mr. Speaker, I know members opposite are relieved. They are finally allowed to say the Conservatives' Brexit deal is a disaster. Yeah. But, Mr. Speaker, that can't just be a political ruse to attack the honourable member for Clacton, however much he deserves it. Or even worse, Mr. Speaker, or even worse, Mr. Speaker, given we still have the highest inflation in the G7, it mustn't be a smokescreen to raise taxes on ordinary people. Mr. Speaker, it must be a call to action. So will the Prime Minister act now to repair the Brexit damage by negotiating a new UK-EU customs union to boost Britain's trade and grow our economy?
No, I don't think that's the way forward. What we've done is to have a much closer relationship with the EU, recognising the damage done by the flawed Brexit deal that the party opposite negotiated. We've also struck deals with India and with the US, record investment into this country, and the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Times has reported that local elections across the country will be delayed for a second year in a row. The leader of my local authority, Surrey County Council, has had to go on record to say that he hasn't called for elections to be cancelled, but other Conservatives clearly have. Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister give me a cast-iron guarantee that my constituents in Woking and others across the country will not lose their democratic right to vote?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question, and he knows we inherited a situation where local councils were underfunded and millions were wasted on duplication. By reforming the system, which is what we're doing, we will save money and reinvest it in improved public services. In Surrey, just in response to his question, we expect the elections to be in the new unitary councils, and we'll be setting out the planned timetable very shortly.